Welcome everyone to the session, Culturally Responsive Project-Based Learning in Computer Science Education. I'm Yolanda. I'm a fellow with the Constellations Center, and it is my pleasure to introduce Lily to you all today. So I will be monitoring the chat. If you're just joining the session, please take the session poll. And with that, we'll give everyone another minute or so and get started. But very excited to be here. Thank you all for joining us this morning. And I just look forward to some great conversations and great information.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Yolanda.
You're welcome. So I am here. I'm going to go off screen, but I am here.
So I don't think, I mean, I guess you all can all hear me and I can't hear you, but I think this is one of those moments where you're like, wow, I could really use like a big screen of Zoom squares. I don't think I was ever going to say that because I'm a little done with Zoom. But all of a sudden right now with this new like interface, I'm like, wow, I would really love to see Zoom squares, which I never thought I would say. Right. Oh, hey, give me some Zoom squares. We got like 30 seconds. I'll let you guys come on in and finish up that poll. I just wanted to get a feel for where you guys are at with what I'm presenting today. I might have overpacked the presentation, but I really, really wanted to give you something that you can go back right into your classroom. And if you so please, granted it's like the last week of June, you know, in August, in the fall, if you want to dip your toe into it and just start, I'm going to really provide you all that scaffolding, all those resources, the rubrics, the project planners, the graphic organizers, the unit planner, like that's all going to come with what we're doing today so that you can really go back and turnkey this in your own classroom and experiment with it. So it doesn't feel so like intimidating, so to speak. All right, 1 minute has passed. Let's show results. Oh, show results. Hold on, there we go. Okay. Hi, Eric. All right, so I'm going to share my screen and I will jump into this. Okay, I hope you guys can all see that. It's showing for me, so I think it is. Okay. So today we're here to learn about project-based learning, but how it dovetails with culturally responsive education. My name is Lily Ho. I'm a K-5 computer science lead educator in New York City. By trade, I was for 12 years a special education teacher and primarily in self-contained. So a lot of the work that I do in CSEd really is about learner variability. You know, how do we reach kids who are neurodiverse, who are multilingual, who come from all walks of life, and how do we give them this gift of thinking computationally and using computer science, like our presenters had talked about in the last hour, for social good. So today we're going to go for 4 major parts to talk about. So what is CRSE and why is it so powerful? What's PBL? How does that work with CRSE? How are we going to design a CRSE Pbl unit? And embedded throughout that are what are the tools and the strategies that we can use. So what is culturally responsive and relevant and sustaining education? It is work that has come from Gloria Ladson-Billings, Geneva Gay, and Django Paris. And this really started back with Gloria Ladson-Billings, where she started coining the idea of culturally relevant pedagogy. And it was about engaging learners who their experiences or their cultures were traditionally excluded from the classroom or the mainstream, right? And from there, Geneva Gay built on that, and she really thought about, well, how does this look like when you're doing the teaching? What's that framework for how we can focus our pedagogy, our practices, our instructional techniques, even our materials, our relationships, the classroom culture, to improve it so that children have this ability to feel connected and see themselves represented. And she also really focuses on asset-based view of students. So that way we can feel that all of our students have success. And that was also mentioned in our presentation before, this idea of really looking at our kids as assets and not deficits to be fixed. And then Django Paris really took Gloria Ladson-Billings' work and took it just a little bit further and really coined the idea of culturally sustaining pedagogy. And this is very intentional about sustaining multiculturalism, sustaining multilingualism, and really honoring the communities of the children that we serve and the child in front of us, and preparing them to thrive in a very diverse, increasingly global society. Hold on. So the next sort of graphic that I have for you is from New America. And really, they kind of came together with this toolkit as a reflection for educators everywhere on, where you're at in this journey of becoming a culturally responsive educator. And these are 8 big competencies that a culturally responsive educator does. So they recognize, they redress bias, they really draw on students' culture to inform their instruction. Real world issues get brought into the classroom, they get addressed, they're not ignoring that. We're still holding all the kids to high expectations. Again, that's something that I'm echoing from the main presentation in terms of how we're not watering things down. We're not lowering the standards, but we're meeting our kids exactly where they are. And this part, I would say, is probably the hardest, is number 8, reflecting on your own cultural lens. I think that is probably the hardest thing, and to be examining yourself with criticality and where you stand and whether your intent and your impact match in the classroom. I think that's really huge. And that's why it's so important to really think about your own practice in a sense. But in many ways, Gloria Ladson-Billings just said, this is really just good teaching. And I think that's actually true. Culturally responsive teaching really is just good teaching. You're meeting the kids where they are, and you're meeting their needs on every level. So what's project-based learning? Essentially, project-based learning is where it is student-centered, it's student-driven, and it really seeks to empower the student in terms of agency, right? And it's very real world. There is a direct relevance to their life. And so our presenters were just talking about, and it's so funny, they hit on everything we're talking about today. How are we giving students the power to make instead of consume? And this is it. This is really one of those ways where you're going to give them that opportunity to engage with real world problems that mean something to them, and end up really going through the practice of being entrepreneurial, being critical of who gets and who doesn't, and how do they create for a world like that. So it sounds really complicated. It is to a degree in some senses if you've never done it before, but today we're really going to walk through the different parts about that. So here are some hallmarks of, what is essentially a high quality PBL. And these are all the things that we want for our children in order to become what we would call like autodidactic, really like self-driven learners, self-motivated learners. So students really end up going through sustained inquiry over the course of their PBL. And they also engage in a lot of real world processes where they have to collaborate in teams. They have to work together. They have to get deliverables in on time. And they also have to iterate and look at their work and see, hey, what went wrong? And how can I make either a better work product or better interactions? And it's very public. The end product is very public, and it's celebrated, and it gives validation to all of their work throughout the course of the unit. So I think that's probably my favorite part about PBLs, is that they're really pumped for what it looks like at the end. But I think the nature of what PBL is so child-friendly that your kids will get 100% sucked into this. So I know y'all are thinking, oh, this is a Monday and I'm hearing a lot of work in this unit already. But let me tell you something. Once you get them rolling, you actually get freed up to sort of just coach in on the side. And that to me has probably been the most amazing light bulb moment for me as a PBL teacher, is that once you set these norms and they know how to engage in that work, it's really hands off and you're managing somewhat the process, but they're doing the rest. And you get to be a coach, which I think is pretty powerful as a teacher. So for students, and this comes from high quality project-based learning, these are the 7 hallmarks of what they're going to get out of a PBL. So they're going to engage in an entire unit where there's sustained inquiry. It's authentic, it's real. They have the student voice and they have the student choice. They get to choose what they want to do. They have to reflect along the way, not just at the end. And they have to open themselves up for critique and revision, which can be a little hard sometimes. But again, you norm the culture in your room, right? You know your kids, you know your classroom. And it is a public product. And we are focusing on either a challenging problem or a question. I usually call this like a driving question. And in some ways, it really echoes this idea of what's the essential question from Wiggins and McTighe that drives a unit of study. So it's not so unfamiliar in that sense. All right, so now that's the student-facing end. This is the teacher-facing end. So these are the things that we end up doing throughout the course of a PBL. We're designing and we're planning it. We are aligning it to standards. It is not like we're like a George Foreman grill, y'all, set it and forget it. Like, it's not like that. Yes, you manage the process and the kids are doing so much of it, but we also have to provide this framework for them to work within. We build the culture. We normalize failure. We celebrate what it means to understand process over the products. We're scaffolding student learning. So our multilingual kids, our special education children, they're not excluded from this. And it's actually really great for them because they're driving the pace of their learning over the course of this. And we assess student learning at benchmarks throughout the way. And my favorite part really is number 7, where you get to really engage with your kids and you get to coach in. It's less that like chalk talk, you know, and more like sitting in on their teams and seeing what it is that's going on. So why are they so great together? Y'all, if they were speed dating, they would have chosen each other first right away because they match up so perfectly. They amplify each other. It is amazing. Here's why. Both of them really demand that students have academic success. We're not watering things down. We're not lowering our standards because that's a dangerous, slippery slope for our most vulnerable kids. Both of them expect you to critically examine systems and the world around them because essentially a PBL asks you to think about a problem that needs to be solved or a question of what we could do better. And CRSC really asks you to look at things with criticality and who has power, who is oppressed, and how do we really go through examining where equity lives or it doesn't live. Both of them also are very culturally relevant and they really build on students' lived experiences. So we're not saying to like a 5-year-old, hey, I really would love to do a project-based learning unit on physics. Y'all, that's not gonna happen. I mean, if you could do it and you wanna email me what that lesson looks like, that would be amazing. But I know in kindergarten, they do forces, they do pushes and pulls. You could do a driving question around that. It feels very child-friendly. And it's still rigorous, but it's still very much developmentally appropriate and meets the kids where they are. So I do want to say that a lot of times they think Pbl is like so high in terms that it's not reachable for our youngest learners or our neurodiverse learners. That's actually not true because the way Pbl works and CRSC together is that you're really meeting the kids at what their assets already are. So what do they already know? How do we amplify that? How do we leverage that for our instruction. And my biggest thing, obviously, is student agency and empowerment. I think that this really gives them power to feel success. I don't know if y'all ever heard of it, but nothing breeds success like success, right? So when kids get to go through this process and see a public product and they're being fatigued over it, their eyes just light up. It just brings home that they love this. And for me, that's so important, that they love this process, because they're going to come back for more, and they're going to do and work more than you ever imagined. I had kids, y'all, showing up at lunch to work. They were asking me to come in early to work. Different story, but very flattering, right? When your kids say, hey, listen, I want to show up to school an hour early, half an hour early, because I want to work with my team. That's amazing. And I think when I saw that shift, that click, that's when it changed for me. I was like, wow, like I gave them this agency and this empowerment, and now they are amping it up and they're taking it where I never even thought they could, because now it's in their hands, right? So I might be the person that provided the vehicle for this, but they're the gasoline, and y'all, they're tanking, okay? So they are going to surprise you when you do this. Oh, and Collectivist Strategies. Fam, I think you all know kids love to talk to each other. They love to hang out with each other. I mean, if there was ever a type of instruction that really leverages them and they're socializing for good, this is it, because we want them to talk. And that's probably one of the biggest things that they enjoy, is that they get to socialize, but in a way that's productive. So essentially, at the end of all this, it's PBL is the vehicle to drive the CRSE in your classroom. They work well together, and you're not going to regret it. Trust me. So here we go. So let's start a PBL unit. I'm very cognizant of the time. There's a few parts to what it is. A PBL unit starts with an entry event. So you're going to excite your kids with something that's really interesting, really motivating, something that like lights their mind on fire. Then you're going to have a driving question. You can create one, but I prefer it if you're really talking about the kids owning this, you can have the kids create it. And let me tell you something, they can really create interesting things. So for example, an entry event that I used this year was a video of a young girl who was deaf, and she was critiquing Instagram about not having captioning and how she felt that it wasn't equitable. It wasn't equitable because there was no accessibility there. So I just showed the video, and then my kids sort of like lit up the chat in Zoom, and they were like, wow, we didn't know that. That's really like unfair. Like, how do we make this right? And then their driving question ended up being, how do we make social media accessible for all people? And that's when you really get this sort of centering question for your kids to work through. And they're going to continuously go through and research and really try to get to the answer for themselves, right? So the next part is examining what are your need to knows. So you're never going to be able to have a kid that ferrets out all the information, right? You're always going to have like one or two kids who are like those researcher kids, and they're going to love finding out everything, but not enough of them to go around. So you will have to kind of curate or pre-teach certain things in mini lessons, so that way they have some information, but not all. And then the big chunk of it is going to be your PBL time. And during your PBL time, which is the massive stretch of your unit, it's going to be planning, researching, designing. They're going to be testing their products. And there's going to be continuous feedback and assessment. And then at the end of it, it's going to just be a public display of what they did. And the last part is evaluation. And I think that part was probably the hardest for my kids, because they kept thinking it was like a gotcha. Because they said, well, what if it don't work? That's okay. And they're like, no, for real. And I said, no, that's okay. I was like, because I've watched you through this whole process. We've had this whole dialogue this whole time. And I know you planned and you did all this for it. So if it failed at the end, it wasn't because of the process you took to get there. And once that clicked, it really brought out this growth mindset in my kids. And that was a huge shift too. So if we're thinking about planning out our unit, I like to go backwards by design. And we know that, we've heard of this before as all teachers. So if you'll notice in my deck, everything is hyperlinked for y'all. So that way, when you get the link to the deck at the end, along with all the other resources, you can just hit them and just get taken to all the information that you need. So I really want you to have the opportunity to try this out in your classroom in like the lowest lift way. So it covers all the 21st century practices. So you're talking about critical thinking, collaboration, communication, being creative, et cetera, et cetera. Then you're going to identify what are the standards that you really want them to get. It doesn't just have to be CS. Well, I mean, like, I'm biased. I'm going to say, yeah, you should do CS. But maybe you want to do a PBL in ELA. Maybe you want to do a PBL in math or science. It is 100% agnostic of content. You can do this for all your content areas. And if you can sneak in computer science, I could support that. And I think a big thing that kind of tripped me up in the beginning when I first started doing this is that last chunk where I didn't identify my resources and my challenges. So I kind of went in like, oh, this is gonna be fantastic. And then I was like, oh, wait, I don't have X, Y, Z. And then there's your last minute run to Party City to get balloons or any other crazy materials that end up being part of your PBL. But really take a good look at like, what are your high-tech resources? What are your low-tech resources? Are you in a virtual setting? Are you in a hybrid setting? Do you have space concerns? So my classroom doesn't have like permanent desks. We have folding tables that we push out to the perimeter and the whole floor is just open. And that's how my kids prototype. And then when they want a desk, they pop down those folding desks and they, it's on wheels. So they just end up doing the work on there. So I think it's really important to take into consideration how flexible your space can be. Because sometimes they're going to take up a lot more than you expect. So as we go through our unit, and you're going to see the framework in just a second, you're going to be planning, and this is me, like I get really granular when I plan for specific days of like feedback with teams, with individual students, and I never poo-poo direct instruction as a self-contained teacher. I think it's incredibly important because we want to give kids every opportunity to succeed. So we have to also build that in too. And then plan for assessment on your milestone deliverable days. So like we have our benchmark assessments. Think about over the course of your unit, what are those big milestones across your unit, and do the assessment on those days because they'll all hand it in on those days. And that's really helpful because we just put it on one project calendar and each team will just show it to me when we were in person, but now that everything's been digitized, it's even easier because it's really like in their work folders. So how would I start this? You would start with inquiry. I think the biggest thing is that kids are so curious and we kind of underestimate what they can come up with in a sense. And so one way that inquiry in PBL really supports culturally responsive education is that it develops this idea of criticality, right? So we can help foster that by looking at entry events that promote interrogation of systems of inequity. So for example, you might show a picture or read aloud or a video, or even data, depending on how old your kids are. So like I did a unit with my 5th graders on the data of minorities or ethnicities that go to Ivy League colleges in a pie chart. And from there, the kids were able to generate a driving question. And the question was, why do so many white people go to Ivy Leagues, but so few minority kids do? And now my kids are primarily Black and brown children. And so this hit home for them, right? This had relevance for them because they want to achieve excellence, but here's this data that they're seeing. And so now they started examining something with criticality. And that was their sustained inquiry over the course of their PBL. So all of these things are examples of how you could kind of promote criticality through an entry event. Hold on. So the next part would be thinking about making it authentic, right? Really creating a driving question that makes sense to them. So like I was mentioning before, that was a really great example in the sense that my kids were able to look at it and really, you could use the See, Think, Wonder protocol, like a visible thinking protocol, or you can use something called a question formulation technique. Both are great ways to allow the students to come up with the question. So a problem can take on many forms. It can be a subject area. It could be a type of project. I know it could be kind of like a made up situation, like a case study or a scenario, but really I push towards fully authentic real world problems. I think that that's where you're gonna get your biggest motivation from your kids. And the problem could be a design challenge and that they have to create something tangible to solve that. So I know like we're already at the halfway mark almost, but I'll give you an example for this part. So I had the kids design, I gave them something called a microbit, and it has certain functionality, certain limitations. And I said, listen, like we're gonna do a PBL and we're gonna start with thinking about how we can use this piece of tech to help solve a problem. And they're like, okay, like you're crazy, but sure. And I said, what's a problem that you see in your community? Way broad, right? And then we started to just kind of funnel in and close that aperture in terms of what they wanted to look at. And it's like, what's bothering you in your class? What's bothering you when you come to school? And let me tell you that the problems that they sought to solve were so student-centered, but yet were so incredibly real and rigorous. Some of the kids were like, kids are being left out at lunch. Maybe I could use a microbit to sort of signal that I feel lonely and I need a friend. That was one. Y'all, apparently there were bathroom parties. I didn't know there were bathroom parties, but they did. And they said, I think it really makes teachers upset because I feel like they're losing time teaching. Oh, loss of instructional time, you don't say. But these were some things that they were thinking about. And they said, well, what if we created a wearable with the microbit to sort of do a countdown timer so that way they knew they have to come back from the bathroom on time as a external reminder. Or another kid said, well, let's use their radio waves, radio frequency between microbits to do a paperless secret communication because they were on the green team. And they said, we don't want to see Post-its like wasted anymore. So it's funny because you don't think that kids can think so critically of things or want to solve these really higher order problems that are going on, but they really can. And honestly, that was amazing, looking at some of that work that they could really do for us. So a big thing is identifying your need to knows. Really thinking about drawing on the funds of knowledge that your children already have. So a big thing in CRSE is recognizing that our children come to us with assets. They have things that they know that we don't know, y'all. And that's just it. If you ask them about Pokemon, I'm telling you, I'd be like, wow, we could do a whole data science project on Pokemon, Trust me, I mean, it's wild. But this goes back to like Zaretta Hammond's idea of culturally responsive teaching in the brain, where you are really setting their synapses on fire. So that way they can make these new connections. It also goes back to the very classic Vygotsky, a zone of proximal development. You need to be able to latch onto something they already know in order to facilitate the knowledge of something new. So in this sense, we can do it a few ways. You can jumpstart your unit with team building activities that also double up as games, Taboo, Pictionary, Charades. If you're virtual, you can use Kahoot or Flibbity or Factile. And you can start activating the prior knowledge that they have for the unit that they're doing. You also want to give them enough productive struggle. A lot of times the kids, when they first started this, it is like foreign concept to them. They're like, wait, what do you mean I'm on my own? What? Yeah. But let me tell you something. Pretty soon they figure out my response is, well, how could you figure that out for yourself? Are there resources in the room that you could use to help you? And it got so funny that by the end of the year, when I first started this, the kids are going, no, we got to figure it out for ourselves. But that's the kind of learner you want. You don't want to create codependence. Part of CRSE is building these kids that can go out there and do it on their own, right? But again, we're going to help them with that, right? So we're going to make sure that while we're doing our formative assessment, we're going to put in the scaffolds as needed. So we're not just going to do like a mass dump so that way they're going to rely on us all the time from the beginning. No, we want them to go through this process of figuring out how to make sense of unstructured problems. Where do I get my resources? How do I lean on my teammates? How do I manage my time for this? Those are all big things. Big thing for me is timers. And I think the kids get so into it that they just lose track of time. So I think it's really important that we have the opportunity to structure them out. So a big visible timer anywhere in your room is helpful. Or like little baby kitchen timers, you can get them on Amazon, just put it on their desk. They can see the countdown for what they're doing. That helps them a lot because it really gives them that executive functioning support. Because our learners are, well, I'm doing K-5, so my learners are a little bit on the younger side, but if you're doing 7 to 12, you probably have more success in terms of them managing your own time. Gather stories. This is a big part of culturally responsive education, is really looking at your communities and honoring them and their families. What are the stories that they bring to the table, right? Have them interview their community. Have them interview their families. Connect to their lived experience. Really sustain what it means to have their ethnic identity represented and celebrated. And that's a really big thing because I think kids almost feel like education is divorced from the home, but it's not. And if you can bridge the two, I guarantee you, you're going to be able to maximize so much more of your children's knowledge, and they're going to also build this culture where they feel welcomed in your classroom, and that it's not that they come to school without their full self, but now they come to you with their fullest self. So now Pbl Work Time. So I want to say Pbl is not walking away, y'all. Like, you are very intentional about how you are setting up this framework, how you're planning out your projects. All these things are, oops, sorry. All these things are linked. And I just wanted to say that I'm going to go back because I think I have skipped way too many slides. Sorry, there we go. So all these things are broken up into manageable chunks for you guys. Let me see if I can show you what I mean. Are you able to see this window? Yes, I think you are. Okay, so this is just an example of some of the deliverables that you can see at which time. Wanted to give you guys that. I also want to give you guys my project planner that I adapted from Pbl Works. So all the red is essentially the work that I'm filling in to help guide you in terms of thinking about the project in milestones, right? So you can use this with your kids when you conference with them in the beginning and start thinking about what are the milestones, what do they have to give you at each part? And then at those milestones, like, what are you assessing at each section? And just, I put in the red here, also like feedback checklists, your collaboration checklists, just to really help you to see what that looks like. And then this will be a student-facing one. So this is also going to be included in all the resources for you, so you guys can have this. So that's just an example of how you really lay it out. It does take planning, but then you can, once you have that going and they have the framework to work within, they can really take it and run with it. It's really like amazing. If you're virtual, for the part where I talk about you want to gather your resources so that your students have everything that they need, if they need it, again, timely scaffolds, not like a dump in the beginning. You want to be able to gather things in one place. So some people love HyperDocs, that's fine. I love Wakelet. I think it gives you like really dynamic resources in it. It's like a HyperDoc on steroids. So I like to gather a lot of my information there for my kids, and then they can access that. Depending on how old your kids are, if I would say grade 6 and up, they could use Trello. They could use ClickUp, and it's just really a project management, a visual project management organizer that moves things as the deliverables are done. So this is also very real world. Like in the real world in tech, you go through project management processes, and this is a great way for kids to start developing how to do that. Instead of us managing everything, they're gonna learn how to do that for themselves. You can also use a project calendar. So I linked this to Edutopia so you guys can just see what that looks like. And you can really just print it out and use it and go. I personally like Google Calendar, where you can kind of put it all in one digital space and it's easier to see. But again, it depends on how comfortable you are with using that. Y'all, I don't see any of the chats, so I'm just letting you know I'm just trucking along in my one window.
You are doing very well, people. There are no, if there's pressing questions, I will let you know. But everyone is still on board with you. So
okay, like I don't know, but I'm continuing. So I think a big thing is collectivism. So a lot of CRSE realizes that in America, individualism is a big deal, y'all. But the culture that I grew up in is collectivist. The culture of my Black and brown children in my school are collectivists. But that's largely ignored. But here's where you can leverage how they operate at home in a collectivist culture for your work in school, right? Build your teams. You will never see kids do as well as when they're in teams, because they love to talk to each other. They love to hang out with each other. And this is a way you can leverage that socializing, that collectivism that they're used to working together, in order to promote their ability to do an end product. And that is huge for me. I think a big thing is you do have to norm your culture. I mean, you really have to make it unequivocal that it is okay to fail. It's okay to take risks. I think that is a very hard thing for kids to do, and it's hard to unlearn. Because I think when you get indoctrinated into, oh, I have to have this certain grade, XYZ, and if I don't do this, I'm not going to get this grade, they're scared to take a risk. And here's why that's negative. If they don't know how to take risks, they're not going to innovate. So again, I always emphasize, right, like process over product. That's super important to me. Don't assign your kids one role for the whole course of the unit. I forced them to rotate. And I gave each session that they came in, a work session, that's what I would call it, a project manager. Actually, they decided it really wasn't me. And so I'm going to just show you guys the link to, oh, I preemptively did this for you guys. So you guys can just make a copy. But I gave each team essentially a project log and a workflow self-assessment. And so each time they came to me, and again, you can obviously make this however you wish, but just so you have something to walk away with, each time they came to class, they had a different project manager, and the team got to rate that project manager. Friends, let me tell you, the kids are harder on each other than I am on them. They would just straight up throw each other under the bus. he didn't do a good job about protecting our workflow today. He didn't like help us to manage our resources, et cetera, et cetera. I was like, wow. I was like, okay, y'all are coming in with violence today. But give it to them. Let them do it, because they will surprise you with how capable they are. And so here's a workflow checklist. This is included. This is just my stuff, like my general 4 roles that I would use because I'm more computer sciencey, but you can obviously tweak it to whatever you like. And then just reflection as a team at the end of the whole project. So this is going to be included in that for you. And then the last bit for in terms of building teams, balance your teams. All your kids come with different assets. You don't want to cluster the skills that they have together. It's good to throw in a little bit of a wild card here and there, because it's this idea of divergent thinking, because they need to know what other perspectives are. And again, that's celebrating others' differences and respecting that. And that's a huge part of what culturally responsive education is. So intentionally creating this divergent thinking is going to be huge, because you're going to get better things out of that. And I would also say, like, if you got real little people like K-2, I would do either whole class and then guide along and then do like a slow release in terms of responsibilities. And in grades 3 to 5, I would say 3 to 5 kids is probably my max. I can't speak to high school because different wheelhouse, but I would still stick with 3 to 5, personally speaking. I think it's just more manageable in terms of workload and the responsibilities. Okay, 1 second. Hold on, I have lost my window. Okay, there we go. So here is where you're gonna get your feedback and where you're going to get your assessment. So for teacher feedback, I would say, oops, I just literally scrolled through a million things. I'm so sorry. Hold on. This is what I get for having a touchpad instead of a real mouse. Okay, so hold on. Did I just skip it, y'all? Like legit, the whole thing? How did I do this? Oh, here we go. I did skip a slide. Sorry, friends. Okay, so metacognition is a big thing, because just like what we talked about is that if you're able to critique yourself and your own work, you're already ahead of the game as a kid. So I like to build in a time at the end of each of these work sessions, 10 minutes. Might be too long for you. You do you. Whatever you think works for your kids. That's, you know your kids best. That's it. That's when they have to reflect on what did they achieve their work goal for that day? What was a success? What was a failure? And what was room for improvement? And then set a goal for the next work session. Now, when they did this, I gave them Seesaw as a way to record their reflection at that huddle and to set their goals. And they would post it, and I would be able to like go through it and give them feedback on that. If you don't like Seesaw, that's fine. You can do Flipgrid, you can do Google Slides, you can do Padlet. It's really your choice. Seesaw just gave me the most options in terms of they could video, they could note take, they could take pictures, they can annotate their project work. And I really find that's great for just learner variability, because there's options there. And you always want to give them options in as many different ways as they can to access the work. And again, really have them focus on how do they collaborate together, because there's that social emotional learning piece that they also need to learn. Okay, now going back to feedback and assessment. So for teacher feedback, this is why I love Seesaw. You can really give them feedback on comments, and they can see it immediately popped up because they're tagged in it. So I think that was really fun to use with them, because it felt very social media-like without social media. You can also work in whatever your learning management system is. If you are a Google Workspace person, leverage that. If you're a Canvas person, leverage that. I think that's really going to be your lightest lift, is doing it digitally, because when I was trying to aggregate all this on like paper and pencil, it was not good. It looked like you were drowning in papers. It was just not a good choice. In terms of student feedback, I like to use something called the tuning protocol. I linked it here for y'all so you can see what that looks like and how to do it. I also would do this, and this is really helpful, like at the end of a milestone, to have team gallery walks. So they would go with their rubrics, walk around from station to station, and examine each other's work, and basically like grade them on the rubric, and then leave the feedback on that table, and then move on. So I think that's really helpful because, you know, it really builds in this culture of iteration. So I think that's a big thing that my kids ended up loving. And they were actually harder on each other than I was if I was going to be grading. So I like that it takes the lift off of you. Again, it goes back to this idea, like you're coaching and you're managing that process, but they're really doing that amazing like adult work almost. So for formative assessments, again, I would say like in that project planner I sent, showed you before, at the end of each milestone sprint, that's really when you want to assess, so that you're never going to end up at the end of your PBL and you're like, yo, this kid like did nothing. Oh crap. No, you're always going to know because you're going to hit at each benchmark, so to speak. And this is something that I've done as well. Y'all probably know what a fishbowl is. So I like to almost norm this way in a sense where you get to see what a high functioning team performs like. This is very real world. And then the kids fishbowl around that team and they take notes and they give feedback and they look at the rubric and they assess that team on how they function. And it also norms what high performing teams do and how they work together. And then they take that back and then they replicate those good norms, right? So I think that's huge in terms of really giving them this like agency and empowerment. So last part is public display and critique. So this is kind of nerve-wracking because I did warn the kids, you're going to make sure that you're showing some product that you've created. Whatever it is you chose, it's going to be something, but it will be critiqued. So who to invite? Obviously families, your local community, businesses, if it relates to a business, right? I love this part, partner with a middle school or high school and have that vertical articulation talking between, you know, the different grade bands, right? Or if you want to just start small, you can just like book buddies, right? Go to like 5th grade and be like, hey, 5th grade, can you come and, you know, be our audience for 2nd grade? So you can scale it as big as you like or as small as you like, but there needs to be some sort of public display and critique. When do I fit this in? You can do it during the school day. If you want to make it a big parent engagement event, evening, Saturday morning, remotely is even better because y'all not leaving your house, but it loses some of that energy that you get, right? And you can always live stream to YouTube if you are super savvy. But in general, I would say that if you're already in person, parents enjoy coming into that, students enjoy coming into that. They get dressed up, you know, they have their work ready, and it's a beautiful thing to see them do it. So how would you do this? So I think that you can do like a gallery showcase, very common, very light lift, right? I love the Shark Tank pitch though. So basically, I would say you can give your parents or your investors or like whoever's going to come see this a set amount of money. And y'all, you have to make sure to tell them it's fake money because the kids are like, wow, these kids have a lot. These like parents have a lot of money. It's like, no. It's like, it's digital money. It's fake money, friends. And let's say they are all allotted like $1,000 to invest, right? I would say that you know your product has been successful and that you've really reached your market if you get the bulk of your investors' money versus your other teammates, like your other like classmates here that are in class. And let me tell you, that lights a fire under them. They want to be the ones that walk away from Shark Tank like the winners with all the money. And that has been very, very fun for me to see. That I didn't quite expect the enthusiasm, but they love this. So if you can, I say go for the Shark Tank idea. All right, so we're almost at the tail's end. So I feel like I'm finally doing good on time. So evaluation. So big thing for me is growth mindset, right? We want to give our kids every opportunity to feel like they can grow. So I dropped in this self-reflection form, and they also, assess through the rubric, self-assess. And I would say for the self-reflection, I would do a Google form, to be honest with you. It's just easier to aggregate their responses instead of collecting paper, and it's all in one spot. It just makes life easier. And I think a big thing for me in my classroom practice is walking the walk, right? If I tell the kids, you need to be open and welcome to feedback, good or bad. You need to be able to use it to iterate and be better. I actually do the same thing. I say to them, here's my feedback form. Tell me what I did well in this unit for you. How could I have done it better, right? What would you tell me to do for the next class that gets this unit? And what did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? So it's really modeling for them that not only do I have those expectations for y'all, I have that expectation for myself. And I'm going to take that feedback and I'm going to do better because you're giving it to me. And I do. I debrief with them. Like, I heard these things, I saw these trends, and I'm going to do better next time. And so it's really about walking that walk with them. I think that's incredibly important because that shows them how real you're being about expecting them to grow. And it's not a gotcha. You really want them to grow. Another thing I did might be slightly controversial is that I would let them grade themselves based on their rubric, right? So at this age group, not typical, right? I did it in grades 3 to 5. And really thinking about this idea of like, are they being critical of their own work, right? Not just telling me you want a 4 out of 4, but why do you deserve it? Did you analyze your work? Did you look at it? So I think that's really important too, is that you build in all these opportunities for students to be essentially independent of you as much as they can, because we want to create these learners that are able to do this work outside of us, right? We don't want to build dependent learners. We don't want to handicap our kids. We want to give them power. And so this is the last slide. I actually finished, wow, in time. I can't believe it, quite frankly. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And I don't know if anybody has questions. I have no idea what's going on in the chat, y'all. So I'm really nervous. I kind of just avoided looking at everything. But I'm not sure if anyone wants to ask anything. Oh, okay. So this is my first time using Hopin. I have Michelle and Sky. Did y'all really want to come on? Oh yeah, let me link y'all to the slide. So sorry. Let me give you all the resources right now. So I'm gonna copy the link.
Been getting great comments and great feedback. I've been watching the chat to make sure there were no pressing questions, but everyone is really loving the tips and tools that you gave. And yes, there are 2 people who may have a question for you.
Perfect.
And so
do I bring them on, Yolanda? Just
I can do it for you.
Oh, thank you.
So they may not have known that was what that feature was for.
That's okay. I mean, so now we're down to like the last 7 minutes. I just saw Eric's comment. They still like stickers and candy. I can't do candy anymore. Too many food allergies, but stickers they are into. Let me tell you something. Stickers are motivating. But does anybody like have questions or comments? I will take feedback 100%. Any day of the week, y'all. So put it down. Did I talk too fast? Am I ugly sweating slightly? Yes. But it's okay. I'm being real about it. But whatever, if you need anything else, y'all let me know, because I try to drop all the resources for you. If you guys want, just do a deep dive into the resources now. Make sure y'all have access to it. And if you need anything else, a thought partner, help, I'm on Twitter. Just message me. I will help. I'm finally going through all the comments now. Chips. Chips. I would work for chips, friends. Kettle cooked chips. Okay, yay. Thanks, everybody.
Someone is saying you may have to do change your share permissions on the acts to the project logs.
Right.
After this session, we have a 10-minute break, and I would agree with Sally. This was an absolutely great session. I know it's hard to present without an audience that you can see, but we have a 10-minute break, and then we will have a featured panel. So everyone, please join us on the stage. Again, Lily, awesome job. Thank you so very much. If there's any questions, and Michelle says she would agree. She's been doing project-based learning for a long time, and it's nice to get it from this angle. So you did. I did project-based learning in my classroom, and there's some familiar things, but there were some new things as well. So that was really, really great.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, y'all, for joining me on a Monday. That's fantastic. All right. Y'all get a break, right?
10-minute break. And then at 11 o'clock, there's a featured panel on the stage.
Okay.
So, thank you so very much.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Hold on. Let me see. Dana, I just dropped in the project log as a forced copy. Let me see if that works for you. Even the forced copy requires access? Let me see. So Michelle and Dana, were you able to access the project logs? Because I made it a forced copy. It shouldn't require it. Really? I'm sorry. Hold on. Let me try and fix that. Give me 1 second. Okay. I'm going to work on it right now. Give me 1 second so I can give you guys the stuff. Share. See, this is why I say go through all the stuff. I can try, but doesn't mean, oh, okay, it's very weird. All right, I'm gonna just change the hyperlink in that. And hopefully this will work. Okay. All right, I just changed the hyperlink in that. I'm gonna drop the link here. Yes, John, Ms. Delavita, John, I think, yes, I agree with you. 100%. Perfect. Yay, fantastic. Oh, you're so welcome. All right. If anybody else has any questions, y'all can just message me. But I think we have to do our 10-minute break. So thank you so much for being here and being so awesome. Bye, everybody.